I mean, there were so many highs with Steve. And with Steve, what I liked about working with him was, well, there's so many things, but mainly he said, look, Phil Collins, John, I've forgotten his name now, John Shearer, Ian Mosley, these guys have all played on my stuff, but now it's your turn. So don't worry about playing exactly what they played. And I was like, oh, no pressure then.
This is Rob Ruckus.
Hey, this is Kate Clover.
Hey guys, it's Nick Collins here from The Effect and Better Strangers.
Hi, my name is Madeline Rose.
Hey, it's Ben McKelvey.
It's Tim Howard here from Mike and the Mechanics.
Hello, I'm Amanda Lehman.
I'm Billy Harvey.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Casey Sampson from the band Twist Stop.
Hey, it's Tony from Fastball.
Hello, everybody. My name is Isaiah Mitchell.
Hey, guys, it's Matt here from the White Lakes.
You're listening to Almost Famous Magazine.
Come join us for this interview. Check it out, Almost Famous Magazine.
All right, welcome everybody back to the hang right here on Almost Famous Magazine. We totally appreciate you coming back for these hangs with some of the greatest artists and musicians out there in the music world today. Really enjoy the fact that the people who subscribe, please hit the bell at the bottom. You know what to do at this point, and please share these videos. Thoroughly excited because you know I enjoy a good drummer chat. Today we have drummer extraordinaire, the one and only Gary O'Toole. Gary, welcome to the hang.
Nice of you to invite me, Scott. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, mate.
Well, the last time we were actually in a room together was in Ottawa, Canada, and this must have been around 2017, maybe 2018, wow. When the first time I had the opportunity to photograph Steve Hackett's band, and you were there. So it's been a while, and I'm looking to catching up on what you're doing these days, because I know you've got an exciting new musical project out called Genesis Visible Touch for those fans of Genesis and prog rock. But I want to kind of start at the beginning, right? When you were when both of us were much younger, did you find music or did music find you? What's your musical origin story?
Music found me. I'm very lucky. My parents were professional musicians at one point. They came across from Ireland in the 50s, and the media at the time, young as it was, thought it would be quite a good con trick to actually take pictures of my mother getting out of a crate as she was broken out of it, saying that this is Ireland's latest export. Mum was a great pianist, and my dad was a great bass player. Actually, he was a really good singer. Bass playing was okay. And they did a lot of shows across London. It educated me because the people that they knew from their time from 56, as they started to make connections and do different shows, those people later in my life would take me in to jams and sit in on at jazz gigs and stuff like that. But because Mum and Dad had been steeped in jazz, from the earliest recollections I've got, I was listening to a variety of different artists, from Miles Davis, but he's a bit far out, Gary. So, and I was only the tender age of about 4. But I started singing with Mum and Dad, and so I would actually go and do like a song or two at the local pub on a weekend, and my Aunt Nora would make sure that I was actually out of that pub and back in bed by 9:15. But yeah, it was influences that mum and dad had from a variety of people, from, as I say, jazz influences. Oscar Peterson was a particularly big influence, and a lot of the people that were associated around that time, because bebop was going quite hard, it really started to go beyond the realms of what my mum and dad were. Capable is such an all-encompassing word, but what they were interested in, really, because the Irish sensibilities were much more sort of country orientated, folk orientated, and my love kind of grew between the cracks of all of these things. And once the Beatles happened, that was it. I was sold. I love melody, and I love the way the bands interacted to enhance that melody. And that's really where my journey began.
So the Beatles got you into rock, right? And then early in your career, you started really moving more into, from what a fan of your music and your drumming in the past would say, is you started to take that jazz and move it into your rock feel, right? You can hear that in your style. How did you figure out, right? What was your process for melding that together to create the style that you play by?
It's interesting because I don't believe that anybody actually considers that they've got their own style until they're battered over the head with it by a variety of people at gigs or in the media, or saying, wow, you sound so different. And it's like, really? The approach that I took was born out of the width and breadth of information I was being fed. So listening to an old harmony band called the High-Lows, and listening to the way in the late 50s, early 60s, they would actually interact with an orchestra, not just a big band, but an orchestra. And then putting that next to what Ringo Starr did, then later on thinking about what Buddy Rich did. And as I was teaching over the years, a number of times people have said, well, I love rock, I love pop, but even like anything that's got like an odd time signature, from progressive rock to fusion. But what has jazz got to do with rock? It's completely different. I said, no, it's not. You go back and you listen to some of the earliest bands, you'll hear the real swing coming out of drummers like Keith Moon, like Ian Pace. And these are not guys that are recognized as being jazzers, but they would actually play so amazingly. And I think there's a swing in there that's actually, for me anyway, it's actually aligned, it's caught up in the melody that's being played. It's possibly why for so many years I had to work on my time, working with a metronome and listening. But I got carried away sometimes with, like, especially the soloistic ideas, especially when it was me that was coming up with them. And I'd be like maybe pushing it a little bit too hard, rushing even. And you start to find a lot of who you are in those songs. And I think it's just something that you take on board without really thinking. It's almost by osmosis.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm a struggling musician, right? And sometimes it's like, it's just hard to find that that one place where it just feels right for you. May not be right for someone else, but right for you. And it's definitely a challenge, especially if you're akin to music being in your DNA and it flows through you, as opposed to like really having to learn, right? You've probably had students who just over and over again, but it just doesn't click, right? Until one day they have that magic moment. So I totally understand where you are with that. What I'm curious, because life is a set of challenges, right? And in your career, whether it was with Steve Hackett or some of the other bands or what you're doing today, what's been one of the things that you've learned as a musician that's been the hardest lesson to learn and most challenging to master it to get a piece of music right?
Being relaxed. Because, it's just like if I'm teaching somebody right at the beginning, they don't want to learn about, okay, you hold the stick here and then you imagine that you're not actually lifting your wrist, but you're just letting it float up. And so the stick comes after it. And it's almost like there's a piece of thread at the back. But when you're playing and you have got no idea of how that feels, you can't identify it. And it takes time to go over and over and identify it. And I think that meant I needed to relax. Now, one of the things, Scott, was the fact that when I was coming up as a young drummer, at first, I would actually sit in the audience where my parents were playing and their respective drummers at the time, one of the first of whom was the first guy that put a pair of sticks in my hand, Jimmy Kavanagh, God rest his soul. Jimmy was a real character. He was lovely. And Jim would actually say, okay, look, this is a single stroke roll. This is a double stroke roll. These are paradiddles. Now just get used to them. This is how it goes. Now sit down with a piece of music, just play them. Enjoy learning the music, but playing this way, and switch off and just let it flow. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about mistakes. And gradually I started to understand that the mistakes is how you recognize you're improving. Whereas most people see them as signposts to their ability going downhill. It is, but it's getting faster because you're getting better. The problems that people have are in identifying when you're getting better. And for me, once I learned to relax, I started to get better. And I started to stop worrying about stuff. I think technically we get too wrapped up in how do I hold the sticks? Do I hold them in sort of match Germanic grip? Do I hold it in much more of a authentic jazz type of grip? Or is it much more of a French grip? And actually, as I started to relax and learn how to play, it became irrelevant, or at least it felt like it. And when I think back on the times that I was really playing my best, I wasn't holding it very specifically in a specific grip, a specific fulcrum, point of contact and control, as we say. I was actually relaxed and I was letting the stick do the work. And I think in life, that's what we need to do, Scott. I really do. I think, excuse me, in life, I think we get so wrapped up in what's right and wrong and not think in terms of, have I done the job well enough? Did it feel good? In music, that's obvious. But when you're doing it in art, it can also, if that's painting, for instance, then it can also feel the same. It can be much harder to identify in things like, non-artistic things like, in engineering, in drawing, in like in the stock markets, and understanding that you've done a good job there is basically when somebody says, yes, you've done a good job. But you really need to understand what the principles are to go behind it. And sometimes people just get so caught up in worrying about getting it right. And once I stopped worrying about that and started to relax, I can see where people say, oh, I don't give a monkeys about that. I just don't care anymore. I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm relaxed. And I often thought there's a huge lesson in that, an absolutely huge lesson. So, yeah, long-winded answer. I'm sorry, Scott.
Well, no. And you've got, you kind of fired a couple neurons for me. And I'm curious because you've been teaching a long time now. You've had many, many students. In today's day and age that we live in this world of people posting all their life moments and, musicians on TikTok and all these different platforms and stuff. Do you think that idea of getting it perfect is inhibiting people's ability to get good? Because you don't see the bad takes, you only see the good takes. Do you see that in your younger students based on, what they're going through with social media?
And not just the younger students. It's really something that I start to recognize when somebody's really doing well, because they stop worrying about all that side stuff, because it's less important. It's much more about being focused on the job in hand. Whether I give somebody 5 lessons or 500 lessons is kind of irrelevant. Once you start to see them understand it, it makes a huge difference to the sound that they create. It's interesting. Like I'll give you an example. I've done martial arts since I was 9. I'm 66, so that's a while. So what I realized was a lot of the lessons that I was learning from martial arts applied directly to everything else, to life, to drums, and everything else in between. I remember one of my teachers, one of my senseis, Master Raf, said to me one day, you're going to take the beginner's class tonight. I said, okay. He said, what do you think you should teach him first? And I gave him some trite answer because I didn't know what to say. He said, what you're going to teach them is how to punch and how to kick. And then you're going to give them something to punch and to kick. He said, because they don't want to come here and find out about Zen and the art of paper folding. They actually want to do some damage to something. They want to, even if it's themselves, they might feel slightly fulfilled. They punch it and they get it wrong. It'll hurt. So they've got to be really careful. There's principles there. I realized that when somebody comes in for a drum lesson, immediately they want to play something. They want to hit something. So the first thing I would always do is get them playing 3 grooves. And I would say, you're going to have these 3 grooves before you walk back out that door. I would get them playing a quarter note groove, an 8th note groove, and a 16th note groove. And once they got those, the sense of disbelief that they'd done something that they'd been told that you'll never be able to do this, you really got to have a sense of rhythm to be able to play drums. And once you give them that, it's like, well, look, the rest of it is easy. That's just about coordination. Once you've got that coordination, then you can do something with it. But again, you've got to be relaxed enough to have confidence that what you're doing is really going to work for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's putting in the time and the focus, getting into what, flow state, I think is the technical term for it. And we live in a world where people are there's so much noise that's a struggle to get into that space to find within yourself to focus towards that goal. And because we live in this world
with noise. That really is an important point, because we get so caught up in doing such a variety of things. And these days, it's completely different to what it was when I was a kid. Back when I was a boy. Honestly, when I was a kid, I couldn't really find a teacher that was going to be able to teach me how to play drums. And I asked at my school, and they were not interested. It was very funny, actually. Mum and Dad went to a parent-teachers evening, and this guy said, "Frankly, Mrs. O'Toole, these kids haven't got an ounce of musicality between the lot of them. If your son could whistle the national anthem, I'd be surprised." Well, my dad had to pull her away. He said, "Thank you, Mr. Cantor." And he took me mum away. She was like, "How dare you talk about my son like that?" But I think, there's a lot of stuff that when you're relaxed, it starts to flow out. And when you're in a personal meeting with somebody, even if it's online, we'll have a conversation, and this is an interaction. The problem that we've got is really that as much as there is all the information in the world now available, and with the advent of AI, it's accessible to everybody. So it's like, first and foremost, what do you choose? I mean, the biggest problem or challenge, I should say, that young drummers have who want to learn is, very often what I used to do was listen to the radio. And if I liked a particular artist, then I would actually go and get that album and I'd listen to it. And there was a whole experience there. You'd listen to the album, you'd read the cover, you'd see all the artwork on the cover. And it was something that had me engrossed. These days, you just go to some companies. I really detest some of these companies that will take an artist's creation and just exhibit it and then get money back for that. It's stealing. When they don't pay the artist their due amount, it's wrong. I'm sorry.
I agree with you completely.
My soapbox over there. Get off that for now. But the whole point is really that you want to be able to play music. When you go online, there's so much there, but there's no index. There's no index to say, this particular piece is it's really advanced. This one is for a complete beginner. And all of these are for the people in the middle. And it's like, well, we don't know which is which, especially when people start to learn how to play an instrument. And so the consequence is people get confused. And that really stops them being relaxed.
Yeah, I think there's too many. There's just so many distractions. And we all, I think, at times suffer from being able to just be laser focused in a moment. And I see it in the workplace. I see it in conversations with friends. There's always something shiny, right? There's always something taking our focus away. Yeah. Let's pivot a little bit to some of the gigs that you've had in your career. The longest I from what I know, has been the Steve Hackett gig. What has been the most fulfilling gig, whether it was in Steve's band or some other gig that you've had that really, it brought you that sense of I'm here and I've arrived and this is where I'm supposed to be?
It's a very, very good question. And And I think the answer is really there isn't one. There's many more than just one. There are occasions where you reach those lofty heights where the geniuses play. And there's the other occasions where you're just a shallow copy. It's a very interesting question. So let me think about that first and foremost. I remember doing like gigs, sitting in on little jazz gigs that a trio that we knew quite well. There was a guy called Laurie Morgan was on drums. Coleridge Good was on bass, and Iggy Quayle was the pianist. Iggy came over on the boat back in the 50s, the Windrush lot. And Iggy was just wonderful. He's from the islands. What a lovely man. And Coleridge was also an absolutely amazing man. He was so patient and great bass player. But these were friends of my mum and dad's. And I got to go and sit in and do different jazz gigs with them. And sometimes I would actually play really well. And because I knew that I was with the music all the way. And even if the bass player took a turn, I'd go with him. And I started to understand much more about that. That's a different challenge to the first time I did a West End show, which was Cats back in 1983. And that was at the New London Theatre. And that was fantastic because it was the first time I'd worked with a conductor. And there are many stories from that, but we haven't got time to go through that now. There were other gigs that I did from working with an orchestra on films to then working with Steve Hackett. I mean, there were so many highs with Steve. And with Steve, what I liked about working with him was, well, there are so many things, but mainly he said, look, Phil Collins, John, I've forgotten his name now, John Shearer, Ian Mosley, these guys have all played on my stuff, but now it's your turn. So don't worry about playing exactly what they played. And I was like, oh, no pressure then. It was interesting, but Steve showed trust in me for the first time. I actually remember the first chat we had where he invited me to go on tour with him. He invited me round to his house. He said he'd seen the gig that I'd recently done and really wanted to work with me. And I went, well, I'll have a word, but I don't think there'll be a problem. I said, wait, yes, I'll work with you. It'll be an absolute pleasure. Steve was really gracious. He said occasionally he'd say, look, there's a particular fill in here that Phil did. I don't want you to play that one, but I want something equally well dominating. No pressure then. So it was really one of those things where he wanted to get my personality out and into the music, which I deeply appreciated. So working with Steve in the first instance was fantastic. Then singing with him was another big jump, particularly when we did Watcher of the Skies. And we'd always done it. So it was like the introduction and then from the keys, and then the drums comes in. And then, you know, it builds and builds. And then all of a sudden we would go to a groove, and then we'd go to the next section where Steve would actually play a bit of a solo. And I said to him one day, why don't we do the whole thing? I'll sing it. He said, oh, no. He said, John Wetton said it can't be done. I'm like, really? And he went, yeah. So I said, well, I'll tell you what. How about we all turn up to rehearsal? I will have learnt it. So we'll just play the whole thing. And if you don't like it, we won't do it. And then it's really, you know the song anyway, and the boys will. So no skin off of anybody's nose apart from me. And he was like, yeah, all right, let's give that a go. So this is typical Steve. We got to the rehearsal studio, walked in the morning, and I said, do you want to do that Watcher? And he went, yeah, okay. So we started the song, sang it, and we finished it. And I'm sort of sitting there thinking Steve might say, yeah, that's great. Okay, let's do that. And he went, and in typical Steve fashion, he was like, no. And he disappeared. He said, I've got to have a cup of tea. And I'm looking at the boys saying, did I screw something up? And they were like, Roger said to me, he'll be back in a minute. He came back, he said, that was amazing. He said, that was so good. He said, I can't wait to see John's face. And John was so lovely. We became really close mates. He was great. He was such a gentleman, a wonderful man. And we shared the same or very similar sense of humour. So I was very fortunate on a number of areas to actually feel that buzz. And not least of all, the last tour that I did with Steve, we did it with an orchestra. And that for me was almost like, wow, I'd done most things before that you get a buzz from, like the first time we did the Royal Albert Hall. That's a big thing for me. I'd seen artists from Eric Clapton to James Last, who's a German big band leader who used to do covers of all the top tunes, anything that was in the charts, James Last would do. It was a little bit cheesy, but I saw him, and the band were absolutely amazing. They really were. But that place, the Royal Albert Hall, was like going to the palace. It was just so amazing. But yeah, I could talk about this for ages, Scott. You've got me.
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure I'm fascinated. I mean, I'm sure other people will be too. So it's all good. What was that? What was it like back when in Steve's band? When was it? You had an evening where there were all these other artists. I think Ray Wilson was there. I think you had John Wetton, and he brought in all these artists to perform with the band. That
was the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah. What was the buzz like? What was that whole feel of having so many amazing artists portraying this music that, for the staunch, diehard Genesis fan, if you look online, one person performs it with a bum note, and like the world is coming to an end. So what was it like having having those people around to portray the music in a way that many had never heard before? And it had to be magical, I would imagine.
Well, yeah. I mean, to be honest, if you go back before that, Steve did an album called Genesis Revisited. And he had a number of different artists on that album. So when we got to the point where we did Genesis Revisited 2, there were a bunch of people that came that recorded for it. And Steve wanted to hear all of these different artists do their interpretation on it. And there were just so many people that were involved in it. It was amazing. But when we came to actually do the gig, it was one of those where we turned up for the sound check in the afternoon, and a couple of the guys turned up really early. one of them was a guy called Nick Kershaw. I'm not sure if you've heard of Nick in the States. Nick is amazing. He's a lovely, lovely fella. I was a big fan, and a mate of mine used to play percussion with him, Gary Wallace. And it was funny that I'd never met Nick until that night. And we just got chatting about stuff, and I was doing harmonies for him. And I said, look, man, if you don't want me in doing the harmonies, just let me know. I'm cool with it, you know. And he was like, no, please. So we were also wrapped up in just doing the music. And it was such a special night because it was a big lighting rig. There was a screen behind us, which was like a digital screen showing all these different clips, and it was just great. It when you look at it, as the saying goes, the sum of the whole was much greater than the sum of the individual parts. And so everybody wanted to do a good job on the music of Steve and Genesis. And it was magical. You're absolutely right on so many levels. But when you're up there, you ain't got time to think about that. You just haven't. It's like, okay, head down, do what you like. Just don't screw up.
Getting back to being focused, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was one of those things that I wasn't quite relaxed yet. I was getting there, but I wasn't quite relaxed with it. But it was a lot of fun, and it really helped on so many levels.
Since that, your time in Steve's band and touring with him has come to an end. I think this is a really good segue because now you have your own gig, Genesis, Visible Touch. What led you to put that together? Number one, and then number two, for those who have yet to see you perform with your band, what can they expect, and what are some of the high points of the performance for them, or it would be for an audience member?
Man, okay, well, I've got to tell you a story here because first and foremost, I am the lead singer, and I'm kind of doing Phil Collins' role. The band had been together for a few years, and the keyboard player and the drummer singer, they're Scousers, so they're from Liverpool. But it was a hell of a long way for them to come down to the south to actually rehearse or do anything like that. So I'd parted company with Steve. I parted company with Steve the end of 2018, and it was kind of a tough time because my marriage was coming to an end, and I didn't realize it, but everything just kind of fell apart. And I think it was quite a lot to do with the fact I was away a lot. I have a stepson and 2 kids of my own. And my wife was saying, first of all, well, you know, you're going to have to move out. And I was like, okay. And so I started looking, but I couldn't find anywhere. So in the finish of it, she said, look, you stay here. You look after the kids. I'll go and find somewhere. It will be easier for me. And I thought it wasn't what I was going for, but I was so relieved because I thought, right, well, I'm going to be able to help with the kids much more if I'm here, because if one of them's sick, as is actually the case today, if she had been okay this morning, I would have taken her into school because my ex doesn't drive. So there's a lot of pragmatic things that actually worked around that particular relationship. But I think being away with Steve for so long was problematic. So this gig, I have not been looking for a gig. And then a friend of mine, Paul Scott, great bass player here, rings me up and says, Gal, Facebook, have you seen that site on Facebook where, musicians wanted? Are you a member of any of it? I went, no, I never looked at it. And he went, well, perhaps you should have a look at this. I went, well, okay. He said, these guys are looking for a drummer singer. I went, oh, okay. He said, so do me a favor. He said, here's the contact info. Send him an email. I said, all right, I'll have a chat with him. So anyway, I sent him an email. And I said, look, pal of mine tells me that you're looking for somebody to be able to sing and play drums. And I hear it's a Genesis-based thing. And they were like, yeah, man, yeah. I said, well, look, I'd be interested. Said, okay, so auditions are on Monday next week. Why don't you come down? So they gave me the address. I brought my kit, went in, and there's another drummer there, Russ Wilson. He's great. And I'm kind of looking at these guys, and I'm thinking, yeah, we get on. We sort of click. And they said, right, well, that's great. We've got another audition for a keyboard player as well on Friday. Why don't you come down to that? Are you okay with that? And I said, well, yeah, man. Then a few hours after I got home, I actually rang them and said, listen, you haven't said whether you like me or didn't like me or, I'll come down and do Friday by all means. But let me know if you're happy with what I'm doing, because I want to keep my options open, if just in case. And they went, yeah, no problem at all. Anyway, a couple of days later, Stu rings me back. Stu's like, two of the guys play bass and play guitar and sort of swap it around. And Stu rings me back and he says, yeah, it'd be great to get you in. I went, oh, fantastic. He said, yeah, the job's yours if you want it. So I went, yeah, okay. Anyway, a couple of hours later, I rang Paul and said, listen, man, thank you so much. I've got the gig. He said, well, of course you got the gig. You're a shoe-in. I said, mate, you and I have been in this industry for a long flipping time. Nobody's ever a shoe-in. He went, you haven't seen the ad, have you? I said, what ad? It turns out that they put an advert up saying they were looking for a keyboard player. And if you know anybody that can sing and play drums like this guy, and there's a video of me. I had no idea. So honestly, getting to play the music and hang with these guys, and we just get on. Stu Norman is just fantastic. He does a lot of the organising. Martin Gordon is he's also an amazing performer, really. Guitar, bass, and sings. And Russ at the back, and we've got a young keyboard player called Bartak, who he's picked this up so quick. Now I can't say too much about him because I don't want to get anything wrong. But I think this is one of his first gigs, and he's amazing. He just picked this stuff up and just ran with it. So, all credit to him. It's fun, though. It really is fun. We have fun on stage. And I think sometimes, like I remember going to see one Genesis cover band, won't say who, and I saw Steve in reception of the gig. I said, what are you doing here? He said, I've come down to see the guy. Oh, yeah, okay. So have I. I've got friends too. And I said to him afterwards, what'd you make of it? And he went, Well, I love it. He said, I like it when it's a little bit more free, a little bit more open, with allowing people to expand on ideas a little bit more. And to be fair, that's what we do. We're careful not to change, what everybody recognizes in the music, but keep that beating heart of Genesis in the music, because it's theirs. It's not mine. It's not the boys. But how you express it, that is ours. That's our performance. And how we put it across, if we can put anywhere close to sort of 10% of the heart that goes behind what Genesis played, I think we've got it. And I think we'll have the audience every time. And so far, thank God, the audience has loved it. They really have. But honestly, Scott, it's got the upside of not taking me away for months on end. And it means that, we've just done a few gigs so far, but just learning all the lyrics is a completely different skill set to understanding what the drums are in any particular song. But it's one that I've really enjoyed. It's a challenge that I've really come to love, because the songs are so good and they're so powerful, and you can't ask for much more than that. It's melody based.
Yeah, no. I mean, the music has stood the test of time. I mean, you can put on a Genesis song from early 70s, and it could have been created yesterday. I mean, they really did an incredible job with the music. And that said, the set list that you guys perform, do you do any songs out of the catalog that are, were either never performed before, some deep cuts? Do you do, or, what do you, when you choose the songs, are you giving the audience something they may not have experienced before because they hadn't heard one of those songs performed live, possibly?
I don't think so. No. What I've seen, I mean, from my perspective, having played with Steve Hackett for like 20 years, I played predominantly the first half of the repertoire, from maybe 69, with the tunes like The Knife, which I think was pre-70s, all the way through Wind and Wuthering. So we basically focused on all that stuff. And Steve was really interested in some of those things. He wanted me to sing a lot more, but a decision was made that they would get a defined singer in, which is where Nad came in. And I was really disappointed, in as much as I wanted to sing those songs and I wanted to sing more of them, but I never got the opportunity. And there was a decision made that took that away from me many moons ago. But with this new challenge, I was then given the opportunity to front the band, which is amazing, and to talk to the audience, which is a lot of fun. At least it has been so far. They don't throw anything. It's great. But then singing like the more recent part of the repertoire of their catalogue, from That's All, Jesus He Knows Me, all the songs that came later, but they still want me to sing things like Blood on the Rooftops, which I always loved singing with Steve's band. I really, really did enjoy it. It's why I wanted to do more. So getting the option to actually sing some of the songs that I really do love, and we're probably going to move it on to doing more in the future. So I'll think about what the options are and see if the boys are agreeable to, if there's anything that we really want to do, because the whole catalogue's open to us, all of it. So, they call it longs and shorts because some of the songs are very long. Some of them are very short. And it doesn't matter from which decade they came. We just get a chance to play them and sing them. So it's tremendous fun. Honest to God, it really is. When you get up there and you sing and you think, yeah, man, I nailed that. I absolutely got that right then. That feels so good.
I look. I wish I could come over the next time you guys perform. Maybe next year I'll have a chance. So maybe we get a chance to coordinate that. Outside of the music of Genesis, who are some artists that you're enjoying listening to that we can kind of share with other people? Do you have a few? It could be a new artist, an old artist that when you want to enjoy the experience of sitting down with some music, who are some that you're currently listening to?
This is the impossible question. It's like somebody asked me many moons ago. The way they used to do this thing on Facebook where, your top 10 albums of all time. It's just like, man, I'll put 100 together and not even think about it. There are, again, I think it really does depend on where you are in the journey. So from early days with watching Buddy Rich and going to see him live, and then going and seeing a variety of other bands from Emerson, Lake and Palmer on upwards, it's always been, my taste has always been fairly eclectic. And funnily enough, the very first time I actually sat down and wrote something, it didn't have any drums on it. It was much more moodscape, strings and stuff. So to hear bands like Snarky Puppy and every band that's associated with them, there are so many performances. Lala Hathaway singing with them. And I think they got an Emmy for that particular track. It might have been called something. And she is amazing, but the band plays so great. And again, it's like melody. The keyboard player, because there's two of them. There's Patrick and there's the other guy, who's just, he's so wondrous. What he does is so rhythmically free that it really sparks what a Snarky Puppy do in certain points. I love it so much. And the look of absolute undiluted joy and enthusiasm as he hits a high point in a solo where he's just almost woken up to the fact that he's here and he's playing it, and it looks at, and then his mate Patrick grabbing him and hugging him at the end. It's just such a joyous thing. There are so many bands that I listen to, and I'm afraid I can't just give three. Snarky Puppy are the first ones that actually spring to mind. They're, especially when I start to think back on the people that I loved as drummers and why I really love their performances. When it comes to singers, I've got the same thing. So I'd always leave somebody out. You know, for years, I was a big Billy Joel fan. I still am. But when somebody asked me about my favourite singers, I gave off a list and I missed Billy Joel off of it. And he's such a formative part of who I am that I found that just weird that I wouldn't have actually gone, yeah, Billy Joel, of course. But there's so many different artists that I can't think of anybody that actually stands out over and above and beyond. You know, I love playing guitar, but I don't get time at the moment. I haven't for about the last 3 years. But I love sitting down with an acoustic and just strumming through some things. And Steve Hackett used to take the mickey out of me because for a while there, every time I went to the States, I picked up like another Gibson. And when we were on tour and he would be interviewed, if he saw me, say, go and speak to him. He's got a better guitar collection than I have. Because I'd buy all these great guitars. I had to sell them in the finish just to be able to earn, just to be able to eat. But it's fun. It's real. And when you keep it real, you start to realize that these are the moments of your life. And so listening to James Taylor, you know, I've listened to him ever since Fire and Rain. But, you know, the fact that one of my favorite people and drummers, Steve Gadd, plays with him quite regularly is such, you know, there's a thing of beauty that comes from that. And it's just, it is beautiful. It really is to me.
Yeah. No, I like to wrap things up with that question because I think it's important. And going a little bit back to what you were saying earlier, that there's so much out there now. There are so many people creating music, good, bad, or otherwise, that talking about artists that we may remember off the top of our head or really having to think about, you know what, I haven't listened to that in a long time, but I really love that artist, or I got something from this one. I think it's important for people who are watching and for us in lives, so that we can find this variety and we can actually, you know, say, wait a minute, Gary's a big Billy Joel fan. Wait a minute. I want to go back and think about that. Has there been any Billy Joel influence? Who knows how these things interact with us and have influence on us. I think it's important to share those things.
I've got to say, one of the sessions I did many moons ago, for a mate of mine, Marius de Vries, I'd just done a film with him, Moulin Rouge, which was a huge film. And he said, look, I've got another thing next week. It's for a Ewan McGregor film. So perhaps you'd like to be on that too. I went, yeah, mate, please, you know, any work, I'm available. Anyway, he said, look, it's going to be a bit of a long day. So if you could get there to the studio early, we're starting at 10:30. I was outside at 9. I was set and ready to roll at 9:30. And the guy who was engineering it, Toddy, who I subsequently worked on some things with as well. But Toddy said to me, Gal, are you ready? And I went, yes, mate. He said, well, look, the song we're doing is an old Nat King Cole song called I Wish You Love. And Chrissy Hind is going to come in and sing it. And I went, well, that's great. So he said, what Marius asked is, you know, maybe you could put a track down. I said, well, yeah, just give me the click. Is there he said, well, we're doing the same arrangement as Nat Cole's arrangement. So why don't you just play along to the track? Do you know the track? I went, I wrote it. I said, yes, mate, I know it. So he said, okay, so it's just brushes. So I've got like a jazz kit set up, and I got to record with Nat King Cole singing I Wish You Love and that fantastic backing band. And so I'm just playing and I'm in a state of bliss. I'm just enjoying myself. I'm not, that's all. He said, I'm just going to get levels. At the end of it, I finished it and he went, I think that's a take. At this point, in walks Marius and he went, ready to go, gal. And Toddy says, I think we've got it, boss. So he said, all right, well, can we just do another one just for safety? And I went, yeah, of course. So we played through it again. I think they used my first take. I'd done other things for Marius. And sometimes he would say, yeah, I love that. Can you just do a bunch of fills this time? And then I'll cut and paste according to what I think might work. So in other words, have fun with the track. Just do something crazy, not on that particular one, but on another few things that I did for him. And I said, yeah, of course. And it was always interesting. And as long as you don't limit yourself, I think you can be creative. And it doesn't have to be sort of carved in stone as being this is the absolute way to do it. And a very quick example of that, if you don't mind, if we got time. I did another session with him, and there was a great guitarist walked in who I hadn't seen for ages, Robbie McIntosh. And Robbie was just, I'd met him a few times, and he came in and made a fuss of me. And I was like, wow, yeah, this guy's just incredible. Anyway, Marius said, all right, Gal, what I want is for you to actually, at the beginning of this track, I want you to go nuts. And I'm thinking, oh, God, not somebody else, thinking the drummer just has a fit. And then, that's like, that's what Keith Moon did. So I said, look, what is it you want exactly? He said, I want complete chaos. So I said, okay, right. So if I do this thing where I'm playing all around the kit and I've got I'm playing in groups of 5s and groups of 7s and maybe a few 11s and then I come back in with a groove. And he went, yeah, okay, let's try it. And so we tried it 3 times and he went, Gal, can you just do what I ask? You just go nuts on the kit. And I went, okay. He said, just like the kit's falling downstairs. And that's what I did. And then we did all of this stuff and then sing. And then we're into the song. And he went, mwah. It worked perfectly. But it was such a lesson because I was trying to create chaos out of nothing. And chaos lives there already. And so I realized there's a time to harness it and just let your inner being come out and do what it's got to do. Then put it back in the box, put a little bow on top of it, and stick it up on a shelf and leave it there until the next time somebody wants utter chaos. But don't try and make it up.
That's a great story. Gary, this has been amazing. We could probably spend many more hours. You've got fantastic stories, and I really appreciate the thought in how you approach things and the lessons that you've given just in this conversation that people can take away and use themselves, because our legacy is what we give to others. And I think this conversation has really given a lot to for the people who are viewing. So I thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'm glad we were able to finally work this out. For everyone watching, go see Gary perform. Right, that's how musicians make money. Going back to what he said, you can rent music online or you can buy it. Whether it's a ticket to a show, an album or merch, support your musicians. These are people who spend countless hours putting time and effort into learning something to bring you joy. And there's such great value in it. Please treat it that way. I'm a big proponent of that. You brought that up earlier too, and I talk about it all the time. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again, and maybe I'll get a chance to see you when you're performing. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everybody for hanging with us today, and keep sharing these videos, subscribe, and we'll be back soon. So Gary, thanks so much.
Cheers, Scott.
Cheers,
thanks, everybody.